Let's grumble.
In this video, we're going to talk about the importance of rules. Now, it's one of the first questions I ask my dog behavior clients, and usually the answer to that question really indicates whether or not there is a healthy leader-follower dynamic set up in the household. Now, before I get into this and give you some examples for rules, I want to kind of talk about the psychology of rules for humans and dogs, because they are very different. Now, as humans, rules are introduced to us when we are a little one. We're a little kid and our parents have to watch us because we might do the wrong thing. So your mom says, you have to stay in this room. But my brother's over there in that room. I want to go in that room. No, but I can't watch you in that room, so I need you to stay here. So we look at rules as a negative. And we also look at enforcing rules as being mean. Mom, why won't you let me go play with my brother? Well, mom's not being mean. She just needs to keep you safe. But we don't see it at that age. And so that's how rules are introduced to us. And for the rest of our lives, even when we become parents ourselves, we still look at rules as kind of a negative and enforcing rules as kind of being mean. Now, what is a positive when it comes to rules and you're a kid? Breaking the rules. It's Friday night. I don't have school tomorrow. Can I stay up late and watch this movie? And your mom's like, yeah. And you're like, yay, I get to break the rule. So that's the psychology that humans have with rules. And like I said, we carry them for the rest of our life. Now, for dogs can't communicate verbally. So one of the ways that they communicate with each other and find out what they can and cannot do is by probing. I'm going to go down and see how far I can go before somebody says, ah. Now, if the dog's not allowed in the kitchen, and the second that the dog crosses the threshold, you disagree, they're going to come back and try it a little bit later on. Let's say there's an area rug here in front of us. I'm a dog, and it's your area rug, and it's expensive, and you don't want me to go on it. And so as a dog, I'm going to cross the threshold. The instant I cross the threshold, if you disagree with me, remember, dogs learn through repetition, consistency, and good timing. Hold up 3 fingers, you actually have 3 seconds to correct or reward your dog for them to have the ability to make the connection. But it has to be repeated over and over consistently. So let's say there's the area rug in front of us, and I cross the threshold here, and you disagree. Like, that didn't work, so I move over and try here, and you disagree. That didn't work. Here, 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 here. After like 15 times, people start thinking, is this dog when is it going to figure it out? Well, as a dog, I'm trying to determine, does the boundary go all the way around? So I'm really being thorough. I'm not being defiant. That's how we look at it, as being defiant. So let's say 15 times in a row, I try to cross the threshold, and you disagree, and the 16th time, you are distracted, and I cross the threshold. I don't do anything wrong. But in my mind as a dog, the way that I interpret that is, oh, in this house, I have to ask 16 times to get my way. Now, let's say the next time you block 34 times before you get distracted, and I'm like, oh, they moved the goalpost. Now I have to try 35 times. And the dog's going to probe all the way around to see, is there an entry point I haven't found? And so that's when they're being, and not only just an entry point, but also a combination. Maybe when you guys are eating dinner, I can cross the threshold. Or when the kids are over there playing, the TV's on, and it's light out, maybe I can cross the threshold then. But let's say that 500 times in a row you are consistent. You're equal to the task. Every single time you try to cross that I try to cross the threshold, you disagree. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? They clearly don't want me to go on that rug. I'm just going to take my list, cross that off, go on the rug. And after a week goes by, you're like, you know what? David's been such a good dog. He hasn't tried to cross this threshold once. David, why don't you come over here and cross the threshold and lay down on the carpet? As a dog, I'm just like, you just blew my mind. I was never going to cross the threshold again, and now you're saying I have to cross 501 times? So it gets very confusing for dogs. And we look at breaking the rule, like I said, as a positive, but it's not. It is confusing for them. Because they go through life probing, waiting for us to tell them where that rule is, it's very important that we have rules so we can act like a leader. Now, we have to think, look, I'm the human, so you should respect me as the authority figure. Dogs don't see it that way. And matter of fact, dogs are like, you only have 2 legs. Why should I listen to you? And dogs understand we're different species. There can be a member of your family, but they understand there is a difference. Really, the way I think about it is burning energy for dogs is almost a form of currency. If the dog is doing something wrong and you're yelling at the dog not to do it, as loud and as nasty as you can, it's nowhere near as powerful if you were to silently stand up and walk over there, because you're burning energy when you stand up and walk over there. So basically, enforcing rules consistently, even if the dog wants to do something but we say no, that can be a great way to establish what I like to call a healthy leader-follower dynamic. Now, one little offshoot to this is a lot of us accidentally train dogs to misbehave. Anything your dog is doing when you pet it is what you're rewarding or giving the dog, amplifying. So if your dog comes and sits in front of you and you don't do anything, or if your dog steals remote control and suddenly you get up and chase the dog, well, for dogs, any attention is validating. So clearly they must like me grabbing the remote control because that's the easiest way to get my human's attention. This is why we talk about petting with a purpose and passive training, which we've covered in other videos. But for rules, if we are consistent, we don't allow the dog on the furniture. The dog's going to try over and over again, like I talked about earlier, through all those different capacities. And if we're equal to the task, the dog's like, you know what, I'm just not allowed on the furniture. So basically, if a dog is, if we are consistently enforcing rules, the dog sees us acting like a leader. They might necessarily, we have the negative perception, like I talked about earlier, that they think we're mean. We're not. It's a form of communication. You have to make that distinction with your puppy. Remember, you're going to have your puppy for 10, 15, depending on the breed, up to 20 years. You're going to have a long time to let them do things. For some reason, we have puppies where like, okay, here is access to absolutely everything all at once. Then we have nowhere to go up from that. When you get a job, you don't start at the highest position, you start at a low position, and as you work hard, you get promoted. You get more privileges and access. And I want you to think of these rules as privileges and not rights. All right, so let's talk about some, really quickly, because this is getting to be a longer video, let's talk about some rules that we can enforce. So I like to ask a dog to sit. You should almost think of sitting as a way of saying please or thank you. So I go to the door, I tell the dog to sit, and I tell it one time. The dog now has 3 seconds to sit. If the dog doesn't sit by the 3rd second, I don't repeat the command. Remember, the more you repeat it, the less you mean it. I walk away, I sit down somewhere, and I wait for 1 minute and ask Google or Alexa or whatever you have, or set a timer on your watch because it'll go by too quick or not quick enough. After 1 minute, go back to the door and tell the dog, command sit, and it has 3 seconds to comply. If it doesn't sit, walk away this time for 2 minutes, next time for 4 minutes, next time for 8 minutes, and make sure you're sitting down somewhere nearby, but not at the door. Eventually, when you go to the door and say sit, and the dog sits, boom, you open that door like there's remote control in their butt. Now, the only time that I don't do this is if it's a potty training issue. We don't want to have the dog, well, you wouldn't let me out, so I had an accident. If you're potty training, this would come in a little bit later. But basically, what will happen eventually, the dog goes sit at the door as their way of saying, I'd like to go outside. I have a lot of dogs that go pound and jump up at the door because that, like I talked about earlier, gets the attention from the humans. And when humans train their dogs to go jump and pound at the door to get their attention. If your dog pounds at the door, the best thing you do is ignore it. I know it's hard, especially if you're worried the dog's going to break the door. But the more that you react, the more the dog's going to continue offering that behavior. If you follow this rule with sitting at the door, eventually your dog goes and sits at the door. It's a nice, polite, well-mannered dog. Now, I first do this whatever direction the dog wants to do. If it wants to go outside, do it when it's inside. If it wants to come inside, do it when it's outside. And also make sure your dog can sit. Some people have steps that go outside the door to the backyard, and it's a narrow step, and the dog won't sit there, doesn't feel like sitting. Then you might skip and forego that one. So I have 4 dogs here. Farley here is my senior dog, and so he gets to eat first. The other 3 dogs have to go sit their butt in the corner and wait while there's food in their bowls, and they don't have permission to eat. They eat one at a time. I give them permission to eat. And there are times where I forget to feed Quest because I'm actually out of the room. I'm not even in the room supervising anymore. And I get a phone call and I forget about it. I go in the kitchen an hour later to get a drink of water. He's still sitting 10 feet away from his bowl waiting for permission to eat. That's wonderful self-control. And I do that. I do take care of him. I hook him up with some cheese and some other stuff. But I don't do it on purpose. But it's wonderful to get there. Now, it took me a long time to get there, so I don't have that expectation right away. If you get a puppy established with good eating habits right away, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. When I'm eating, I don't allow the dogs within 7 feet of me because that is a way a dog would challenge for something is by invading personal space. And it is highly inappropriate for a puppy to be within 7 feet, or any dog, with to anyone or anything that has a high value item. Don't feed your dog people food because that confuses the heck out of them, and you're going to train your puppies to invade your personal space. They're going to do that with your guests and your kids and everybody else. We don't eat the best food. It's better for your dogs not to eat people food. And some people food actually is toxic to dogs, like onion and garlic, which is in just about every meat we have. And remember, no ribs for dogs. Cooked bones can splinter and shred the dog's interior. It's an old school. I used to do it myself before I realized that. They can have non-cooked bones, but not cooked bones. So don't feed your dog people food. Make sure they are 7 feet away from the table when you're eating, or the couch, or wherever it is. A lot of people have area rugs in their house. If you have an area rug kind of right in front of your table and you're sitting on a couch like this and the TV's behind the camera, well, then I might say the dog's not allowed on the carpet while I'm eating. That's a nice, easy line to determine. When there's no food, the dog can come and go as they please, but not when I'm eating. I also do the same thing in the kitchen. When I'm cooking food, I don't allow the dog in the kitchen. We have a video actually about how to establish an invisible boundary and teach your dog to get out of the kitchen. I invite you to watch that one as well. Let me see. Also for dogs, whoever's in front is perceived to be the leader. So if I'm going through a door with my dog always comes out behind me. So these are some examples of rules. There's a whole lot of other things you can do for dogs, making them sit and wait before you give them their food, or if I'm going to play fetch, you have to sit, drop the ball, and then sit before I pick it up. Things along those lines. So look for ways to incorporate some rules and consistently enforce them so your dog sees you acting like a leader. The more that you enforce your dog's rules consistently, the more the dog will respect your authority, and then when you do give a command, they don't look at it as optional. But if you don't have any rules, I promise you, your dog will think that listening to you is optional. It's much better to start a puppy off with rules and structure, just like we do kids, to help them establish good behavior patterns. Like I said, if you don't allow them the furniture for a month or 6 months or whatever it is, eventually you can allow them later on once they're well behaved, just like your kids have to go to bed at a certain time and all the rest of that fun stuff. But when they become adults, they set their own time schedule. But you set them up for success by helping them start off on the right foot. And that's basically how you should think about enforcing rules. So this is basically a summary of how rules and enforcing rules consistently can help your dog see you as an authority figure.
Quest, you are a goofball.